There is a particular quality to silence that only those who have known noise can truly appreciate. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, a weight that settles over the soul like dust on abandoned machinery, like starlight on the hull of a ship that has traveled too far from home. I have learned more about silence in the past 17 cycles than I learned in 3,000 years of service to the Galactic Concord. I have learned that silence can be a mercy. I have learned that it can be a warning. And I have learned most terribly of all that silence can be a weapon. My name is Caliph Vor, and I was the arbiter of assessment for the Concord's inner chamber, the official responsible for evaluating emerging species, determining their threat level, and recommending appropriate integration protocols. For 18 centuries, I performed this duty with what I believed was wisdom and precision. I studied the rise and fall of civilizations, catalogued the development of technologies, predicted the trajectories of cultures. I was considered the finest assessor in the Concord's 12,000-year history. Humanity was my greatest failure. Or perhaps my greatest education. Even now, after everything that has happened, I am uncertain which description is more accurate. I first became aware of humanity through their electromagnetic emissions, chaotic, unstructured bursts of radio waves that scattered into the cosmos like the desperate cries of a species trying to prove its own existence. The signals were crude, wasteful, technologically embarrassing. They broadcast their entertainment, their conflicts, their most intimate cultural moments into the void, with no apparent awareness that anyone might be listening. I remember my initial assessment. I remember the words I wrote with such certainty. Species displays no capacity for unified action. Internal conflicts endemic and apparently irresolvable. Technology primitive. Threat assessment negligible. Recommendation observe but do not engage. Expected timeline to self-extinction 4 to 7 centuries. The Council accepted my assessment unanimously. Why wouldn't they? I was Caliph Vor, the infallible arbiter, the one who had never been wrong in 1,800 years of service. If I declared humanity irrelevant, then irrelevant they were. That was 240 years ago. 160 years ago, humanity developed faster than light travel. Their method was inelegant, a brute force approach that punched holes through dimensional barriers rather than sliding gracefully between them, as Concorde vessels did. But it worked. Against all my predictions, against all reasonable expectation, they had clawed their way out of their gravity well and into the stars. I revised my assessment. I noted their achievement, but maintained that their internal divisions would prevent any meaningful expansion. Curiosity without unity, I wrote. They will scatter, fragment, and fade. The stars will swallow them, as the stars have swallowed so many before. 120 years ago, humanity established their first extrasolar colonies. 12 worlds in 4 decades. The pace was alarming, but I assured the Council that it was unsustainable. Species that expand too quickly collapse even more rapidly. It was simply a matter of time. 80 years ago, humanity requested formal contact with the Galactic Concord. They sent ambassadors, polite, professional,
apparently reasonable beings who asked questions and listened to answers and made no demands. The Council granted them observer status, the lowest tier of recognition. I remember the presiding voice's words at the formal reception. "Welcome to the community of civilizations. Perhaps in a few millennia you will be ready for full participation."
The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, smiled at this statement. Just smiled. She thanked the Council for its time and returned to her ship, and humanity continued doing whatever humanity did in its small corner of the galaxy.
That smile. I should have paid more attention to that smile.
40 years ago, the Concord faced its first major crisis in 3,000 years, the Vethkai emergence, a hive intelligence that had evolved in the radioactive clouds of a dead galaxy and had spent millions of years drifting toward ours. They arrived without warning, consuming everything in their path: worlds, fleets, civilizations that had existed longer than humanity had possessed language.
The Concord mobilized. We sent our fleets, our weapons, our finest tactical minds. We fought with technologies refined over 12 millennia of galactic dominance. We lost. Not immediately, not completely, but world by world, system by system, the Vethkai pushed deeper into Concord space. Our losses mounted, first thousands of ships, then tens of thousands, then numbers that our record-keepers stopped trying to count. Populations were evacuated, then consumed when evacuation failed. Ancient civilizations, members of the Concord since its founding, ceased to exist. I watched it happen. I watched my carefully ordered assessments become meaningless, my predictions of species trajectories rendered irrelevant by an enemy that had not been predicted at all. I had spent 18 centuries evaluating the wrong threats. 20 years ago, the Council sent a formal request to humanity. Not a command. We had learned by then that commanding humans produced unpredictable results. A request. Would they contribute vessels to the defense of Concord space? Would they join the fight against the Vethkai? The human response was prompt and measured. They would defend their own territory, they said. They would accept refugees who reached their borders. They would share intelligence on Vethkai movements and tactics, but they would not send ships to fight in Concord space. The Council was outraged. The presiding voice denounced human cowardice before the full assembly. I remember his words precisely. When the Vethkai consume the last of us, they will turn to human space next. And humanity will learn, too late, that no species survives alone in this galaxy. Humanity's ambassador, a different one now, a man named James Okonkwo, listened to this denunciation without visible reaction. When the presiding voice finished, Ambassador Okonkwo stood, bowed respectfully, and said only, "We understand your perspective." Then Earth went silent. Not physically silent. Their ships still patrolled their borders. Their refugees still operated with quiet efficiency. Their intelligence reports still arrived, precise and useful. But something changed. A door that had been open, however slightly, closed. Communications became purely functional. Cultural exchange ceased entirely. Human ships, when they encountered Concord vessels, maintained minimum safe distances and responded to hails with automated acknowledgments. They had withdrawn, not in anger, not in fear. They had simply receded, like a tide going out, like a breath being held. For 20 years, I wondered what that silence meant. Then the Vethkai broke through to the core worlds. I was on Valith Prime when the alerts began. Valith Prime, the oldest continuously inhabited world in the Concord,
home to the council chamber itself, center of galactic civilization for 12,000 years. I was in my quarters, reviewing evacuation protocols that we all knew would be meaningless when the first reports came through.
17 Vethkai swarm carriers had emerged from dimensional transit at the edge of the system. Our defensive fleet, what remained of it, was engaging. Projections indicated total fleet loss within 6 hours. Planetary defenses would delay ground consumption by an additional 12 to 18 hours. Total population of Valeth Prime, 43 billion.
Time to complete evacuation. Impossible. I remember sitting in my quarters, watching the tactical displays, calculating the mathematics of extinction. 43 billion lives, 12,000 years of history, the accumulated wisdom of 100 civilizations, the art and science and philosophy of species that had reached for the stars before humanity's ancestors had learned to walk upright.
All of it ending, not in fire or conquest, but in consumption. The Vethkai did not destroy, they absorbed. Every consciousness, every memory, every trace of identity would be dissolved into the hive, converted into raw processing power for an intelligence that had no concept of individual existence. I remember thinking, this is what I failed to predict. Not the Vethkai. No one could have predicted the Vethkai, but the limitations of my own assessment protocols. I had spent 18 centuries measuring threat levels and development trajectories, and I had never once asked the question that might have mattered. Who would help us when we faced something we could not defeat alone? The answer, I had assumed, was obvious. The Concord was the greatest power in the galaxy. We did not need help. We helped others when it suited our interests, when the cost-benefit calculations aligned, when the species in question had proven themselves worthy of our attention.
We had declared humanity irrelevant. We had dismissed their request for full partnership. We had denounced their refusal to die for our cause.
And now we were going to die, and no one was coming to help us. The tactical displays showed our fleet being systematically dismantled. The Vethkai swarm carriers had deployed their consumption drones, billions of them, each one a self-replicating unit that would strip ships and stations down to their component atoms. Our vessels fought bravely, hopelessly. I watched the command signatures wink out one by one, each representing a captain who had chosen to die fighting rather than be absorbed. I was preparing to follow their example. The council had issued dissolution tablets to all senior officials, a final mercy that would scatter our consciousness patterns before the Vethkai could harvest them. When the communication array activated,
An incoming transmission from outside the system on a frequency I did not recognize.
I accepted the hail.
Concord vessel, this is the Earth ship Unconquered. Please respond.
The voice was calm, almost conversational, as if the speaker were asking about weather conditions rather than addressing a dying civilization.
This is Arbiter Kalith Vor, I said. Unconquered, are you aware of the situation in this system?
We are aware, Arbiter. We've been monitoring for some time.
Then you know that your presence here is inadvisable. The Vethkai will consume any vessel in this system. There is no tactical advantage to be gained from... Something in the voice made me stop, a patience that somehow conveyed infinite weight.
You declared us irrelevant. 20 years ago, when we asked to help on our own terms, your council called us cowards. Do you remember that?
I remember.
Do you know why we went silent?
I did not respond. What could I possibly say? We went silent because we were preparing. Not hiding, preparing. For 20 years, every shipyard, every factory, every research facility in human space has been working toward this moment. We knew the Vethkai would reach the core worlds eventually. We knew the Concorde's fleets would fail. We knew that when the end came, we would have to be ready.
Ready for what?
For this. The tactical display flickered. New signatures began appearing at the edge of the system. 1, 10, 100.
1,000.
10,000.
I stared at the display, unable to process what I was seeing. Human ships were emerging from dimensional transit in numbers that should not have been possible. Their fleet had been assessed at 300 vessels. The intelligence was current, verified, certain. The display showed over 40,000 ships.
You miscounted, the voice from the Unconquered said. There was no accusation in it. No satisfaction, just a statement of fact. Your intelligence assessed our visible fleet, the ships we let you see, the ones that patrolled our borders and escorted our transports, and generally behaved like the small, harmless regional power you believed us to be.
That's impossible. The resources required to construct.
Arbiter, humanity has been preparing for existential threats since before we discovered fire. We survived ice ages that should have killed us, plagues that culled 90% of regional populations, wars that nearly ended our civilization. We have stared into the abyss more times than your Concorde has existed, and we have never, not once, stopped preparing for the next time.
The human ships were moving now, forming into attack patterns I did not recognize. They were not elegant like Concorde vessels, not graceful like the ships of older civilizations. They were functional, utilitarian, designed for one purpose and one purpose only. 20 years ago, the voice continued, we offered to help. We offered to share our research, our tactics, our understanding of how to fight an enemy that cannot be reasoned with. Your council rejected that offer. They wanted soldiers, not partners, bodies to throw at the problem. They thought we were too primitive to have anything else to offer.
We were wrong. Yes, you were. But that doesn't matter now. What matters now is that 43 billion lives are about to be consumed, and we have the ability to prevent that. So we're going to. Why?
The question escaped me before I could stop it. After everything we had done, the dismissal, the arrogance, the denunciation, why would humanity risk everything to save us? There was a pause. When the voice returned, it was quieter, almost gentle.
Because we remember what it feels like to face extinction alone. We remember the ice ages when no help came, the plagues when we buried half our children, the wars when we killed each other by the millions because we had forgotten how to be anything else. We remember the silence, Arbiter, the terrible silence of a universe that does not care whether you live or die.
And you remember this, so you help those who treated you as beneath notice? We help because we choose to, because that's who we decided to become. Your council declared us irrelevant. They were wrong about what that word means. Relevance isn't measured in fleet sizes or territorial claims or seats on councils. It's measured in what you do when someone needs help, in whether you answer the call, even when you have every reason not to. On the tactical display, the human fleet engaged the Vethkai. I had watched fleet actions before. I had studied the tactics of 100 species, analyzed the strategies of civilizations that had perfected warfare over millennia. I thought I understood what combat looked like at this scale. I was wrong. Human ships did not fight like Concorde vessels. They did not form elegant formations or execute precisely coordinated maneuvers. They fought like something feral, adaptive, unpredictable, each ship seeming to operate independently while somehow maintaining perfect tactical cohesion. They pressed into the Vethkai swarms with a ferocity that bordered on suicidal, taking losses that would have broken any Concorde fleet.
But they kept coming.
The Vethkai had never faced an enemy like this. Their previous victories had come against civilizations that fought rationally, that calculated acceptable losses, that retreated when the mathematics turned against them. Humanity did not retreat. Humanity did not calculate. Humanity simply attacked, again and again, absorbing losses that should have been impossible and continuing to advance. I watched a human carrier, the Thermopylae, according to the tactical registry, take 17 direct hits from Vethkai consumption beams. By all rational assessment, it should have been dead. Its hull was breached in a dozen places, its engines were failing, its weapon systems were operating at less than 30% capacity. It accelerated directly into the nearest Vethkai swarm carrier. The collision should have destroyed both vessels. Instead, something happened that I still do not fully understand. The Thermopylae's remaining weapons discharged simultaneously, overloading in a cascade that punched through the swarm carrier's central processing node. The Vethkai vessel did not explode. It fragmented, its consumption drones losing coordination, scattering into the void like leaves in a storm. "That's the Brennan maneuver," the voice from the Unconquered said. "Named after Captain Margaret Brennan. She developed it during the Martian Independence War 200 years ago. We've been refining it ever since." "You have tactics specifically designed for suicide attacks?"
We have tactics specifically designed for situations where survival is less important than victory. There's a difference.
I watched the battle unfold, unable to look away. Human ships died by the hundreds, but for every human vessel lost, a Vethkai swarm carrier fell. The consumption drones tried to adapt, tried to overwhelm the human formation with sheer numbers, but the human ships simply adjusted their tactics. Every time the Vethkai found a weakness, the humans closed it. Every time the Vethkai developed a counter, the humans had already moved on to something new.
They were learning in real time, adapting in ways that the Vethkai, with their hive intelligence, their perfect coordination, could not match.
"You're not fighting like a fleet," I said. "You're fighting like individuals. Thousands of individual decisions, coordinated but not controlled." "The Vethkai are a hive mind. They think as one. That makes them powerful, but it also makes them predictable. Every unit responds to the same central logic. Every tactical decision follows the same patterns." The voice paused. "Humanity doesn't work that way. Every captain, every crew, every individual soldier is making their own choices. Millions of independent decisions connected by trust and training, but never controlled. The Vethkai can't predict us because there is no us to predict.
There's just humanity, all of us, together, each doing what we believe is right.
That should create chaos."
It does. Beautiful, terrible, effective chaos, the kind that can only emerge from a species that spent 10,000 years learning to cooperate without being controlled, that learned to fight as individuals while never forgetting that we're part of something larger.
The battle was turning. I could see it in the tactical projections, in the shifting balance of forces, in the way the Vethkai swarms were beginning to fragment. The consumption drones were losing coordination as their carrier ships fell. Human vessels pushed deeper into the enemy formation, each strike targeting the nodes that connected the hive. They were not trying to destroy the Vethkai. They were trying to sever them, to break the connections that made the hive a single entity.
"How long have you been studying them?" I asked. "The Vethkai. How long have you known how to fight them?"
Since before they reached Concord space. We detected their approach 18 years before the first attack. Our long-range observation networks, the ones your assessment teams never noticed, had been tracking them since they entered our galaxy.
18 years? You knew for 18 years and you said nothing?
We tried. 40 years ago, when we first detected anomalous readings from the galactic edge, we submitted a formal report to the Concord Science Assembly. Preliminary analysis, threat assessment, recommended actions. Do you know what happened to that report, Arbiter?
I felt something cold settle in my chest. I don't know.
It was classified as unfounded speculation from a minor species and filed without review. The official response noted that humanity's limited understanding of galactic phenomena made our projections unreliable. The voice was gentle, but the words cut deep. Your Concord had 12,000 years of civilization. We had 200. Clearly, we couldn't possibly know something you didn't.
We ignored you. You ignored everyone who didn't fit your assumptions. The Vethkai approached from the direction of a dead galaxy, a galaxy your astronomers had written off as having no strategic significance. Why would you monitor something that couldn't possibly produce a threat? I closed my eyes. The weight of 18 centuries of certainty pressed down on me, and I felt it crack. "We were so certain," I whispered, "so certain that we understood the universe, that we knew which threats mattered and which didn't, that we could assess and categorize and predict."
The universe doesn't care about certainty, Arbiter. It doesn't respect ancient civilizations or advanced technologies or carefully reasoned assessments. It just is. And sometimes the only thing that matters is whether you're willing to face what's coming, regardless of whether you predicted it or understood it or believed it was possible.
On the tactical display, the last of the Vethkai swarm carriers fragmented. The consumption drones, severed from their central intelligence, drifted aimlessly. Human ships moved through them, destroying them in patient, methodical sweeps. The battle was over. 43 billion lives saved. I sat in silence for a long moment, watching the human fleet reorganize. They had lost over 8,000 ships. 20 million human beings had died in the past 4 hours. And yet, as I monitored their communications, I heard no grief, no celebration, only calm voices coordinating the next phase of operations.
"What happens now?" I asked. "Now, we push them back. The Vethkai have 17 more swarm carriers deployed across Concord space. We're going to hunt them down, one by one, and destroy them all. Then we're going to follow the trail back to wherever they came from and make sure they never threaten this galaxy again."
That will take years, decades perhaps.
Yes, it will.
And you're willing to commit to that? After everything we—
"Arbiter," the voice cut me off gently. "We're not doing this for the Concord. We're not doing it for validation or alliance or political advantage. We're doing it because it needs to be done, because there are billions of lives at stake, because we have the ability to help, and refusing to use that ability would make us something we don't want to be."
And what do you want to be?
"The kind of species that answers when someone calls for help, even if they never asked nicely. Even if they called us irrelevant, even if they went silent when we needed them."
I felt something break inside me. Not painfully, almost with relief.
The weight of certainty, the burden of assessment, the endless confidence of a species that believed it understood everything. It cracked, and through the cracks, something else began to grow.
Humility. "We were wrong about you," I said. "From the very beginning. We looked at your conflicts, your divisions, your chaotic development, and we saw weakness. We never understood that the chaos was the point, that learning to cooperate despite your differences, to fight together despite your disagreements, was what made you strong."
We're not strong, Arbiter. We're stubborn. There's a difference.
A soft sound came through the communication channel. It took me a moment to recognize it as laughter. Maybe not. Maybe stubbornness, applied consistently enough, becomes strength. Maybe that's the only kind of strength that matters in a universe that keeps trying to kill you. In the days that followed, I watched humanity's fleet sweep through Concord space. They fought 17 more major engagements, each one more devastating to the Vethkai than the last. They refined their tactics in real time, adapting to every counter the hive mind attempted, evolving faster than an enemy that had never faced evolution before. I also watched the Concord's reaction. Shock at first, disbelief that the species they had dismissed could accomplish what their ancient fleets could not. Then, gradually, a kind of reluctant respect, and beneath that, something I had never expected to see in the council chamber. Shame. The presiding voice who had denounced humanity's cowardice resigned his position. Several senior counselors followed. The assessment bureau, my bureau, was quietly dissolved. I offered my own resignation, but it was refused. Someone, the new presiding voice said, needed to understand what had gone wrong. Someone needed to ensure it never happened again. I spent the next several years studying humanity, really studying them this time. Not through the lens of assessment protocols and threat matrices, but as they actually were. I visited human worlds, spoke with human historians, learned the stories that they told about themselves.
What I found was not what I expected.
They were not a unified species. They still disagreed about almost everything: politics, economics, philosophy, the proper way to prepare food. They still fought among themselves, argued endlessly, split into factions that seemed irreconcilable.
But when the darkness came, they set all of that aside.
They had a word for it: solidarity. The recognition that some threats were too great for any faction, any nation, any ideology to face alone. When extinction loomed, humanity stopped being a collection of competing interests and became, briefly and terribly, a single entity with a single purpose: survive.
They had learned this lesson the hard way. Their history was littered with moments when they had almost failed, when the ice came and they huddled in caves, when the plague spread and they buried their dead in mass graves, when the bombs fell and they wondered if they would see another sunrise.
Each time they had pulled back from the brink. Each time they had emerged stronger, more resilient, more determined to face whatever came next.
"We don't have the luxury of permanence," one human historian told me. "Your species, the other ancient civilizations, you've had stability for so long that you've forgotten what it means to be truly threatened. You've forgotten that survival is never guaranteed. We never forgot. We couldn't afford to."
The final Vethkai swarm carrier fell 3 years after the Battle of Valeth Prime. Human forces tracked it to a dead system on the galaxy's edge and destroyed it in a 30-hour engagement that cost them another 2,000 ships. When it was over, humanity did something that surprised everyone. They went home. Not entirely. They maintained defensive positions at key locations, kept their intelligence networks active, continued to coordinate with Concord forces on reconstruction efforts. But their main fleet, their hidden armada that had shocked the galaxy, simply withdrew, back to human space, back to their worlds and stations, and the quiet rebuilding of the strength they had expended.
The Council offered them everything: full membership, seats on the inner chamber, territory, resources, political power that would have made them the dominant force in the Concord.
They declined.
"We didn't do this for power," Ambassador Okonkwo explained at the formal ceremony. "We did it because it was right, because you needed help and we could provide it. That's all. We don't want to rule anything. We just want to live in a galaxy where people help each other when they're in trouble."
"And if we had continued to treat you as irrelevant?" the new presiding voice asked. "If we had dismissed you again after this?"
Then we would have gone home anyway. And the next time something threatened the galaxy, we would have come back. And the time after that. And the time after that. Because that's who we are. That's who we choose to be. I am old now. Older than I was when I first assessed humanity. Older than I was when I watched their fleet emerge from the dark. I have seen the Concord transform, seen ancient civilizations learn humility from a species they once dismissed as primitive.
There is a memorial on Valif Prime now. It stands in the plaza before the council chamber, where 12,000 years of galactic history look down on it. The memorial lists the names of every human who died in the war against the Vefkai. All of them. 8 million names, carved into stone that will last until the stars burn out.
Beneath the names, there is an inscription. It was chosen by the council, but the words are human, taken from their own history, from a moment when they faced annihilation and chose to keep fighting anyway.
"We shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire. Neither the sudden shock of battle nor the long-drawn trials of vigilance and exertion will wear us down. Give us the tools, and we will finish the job."
I visit the memorial sometimes, when the weight of history feels too heavy. I stand before those 8 million names, and I remember the lesson that humanity taught us, the lesson we should have learned long ago if we had not been too arrogant to listen.
The Council declared humanity irrelevant. We counted their ships and measured their technology and calculated their threat level, and we found them wanting. We dismissed them as a minor species, a curiosity, a footnote in the great history of the galaxy.
Then Earth went silent, and in that silence they prepared. They built. They trained. They became something that our assessments could not measure, our protocols could not predict, our certainty could not imagine. They became humanity. Not a fleet, not a civilization, not a political entity or a military power or a strategic asset. Just humanity. All of them, together, each one making their own choice to stand against the darkness. And when the darkness came, and we who had declared them irrelevant faced extinction, they answered, not because we deserved it, not because we had earned it, not because they would gain anything from our survival. They answered because that is what humanity does. They answer. There is a transmission that plays continuously now on frequencies that span the galaxy. It is maintained by human stations, powered by human technology, spoken in a human voice. The Council approved it unanimously, and even the most ancient civilizations have acknowledged its wisdom. It says simply, "If you are in danger,
If you face a threat you cannot overcome alone, if you need help, call. Humanity will answer. We do not require alliance. We do not demand payment. We do not ask whether you deserve our help. We only ask that you ask.
That is the lesson of Earth's silence. That is what we failed to understand when we declared them irrelevant. Humanity does not measure their actions by what they receive in return. They measure their actions by who they want to be.
And they want to be the species that answers.
Always. No matter what. May whatever gods exist help those who give them reason to prove it.